This would be the perfect way to end the most stressful, exhausting week that the disciples had ever experienced before. You see, Jesus was doing a lot of teaching and leading and miracles, and they were exhausted as thousands of people continue to press in. Thousands of people continue to gather around Jesus. The disciples weren't used to this. And so when Jesus said, hey, let's cross from this side of the lake over to the other side, the disciples kind of breathed a sigh of relief. This is what they knew: the boat, the water. And Jesus said, let's cross to the other side of the lake. And the conditions were prime. They were optimal for Peter and Andrew and John as seasoned fishermen. They dropped their lines. They were going to drop their lines. They were going to drop their nets. They had their hooks baited. They were set for an evening out on the lake. There was no wind. The waves were sleeping. The water was glass. It was perfect. And as they got going on their trip across the lake, out of nowhere, this vicious, violent storm came at them. And they didn't see it coming. Even though they were experienced fishermen, they had no clue it was coming, and it caught them off guard, and they didn't have time to react or readjust their course. They were now in the throes of it. And they began to panic, and they began to bail water as fast as they could, but their boat wasn't rated for the magnitude, the weight of this storm. And they begin to get fearful, like, is this the end? Is this it for us? And Peter, being the loudmouth that he is, thought, well, Jesus just helped other people. He should be helping us. And so in the back of the boat, Peter kind of worked his way, and he came to Jesus, and he was beginning to ask for help, and he looked, and Jesus was laying down, sleeping. And Peter began to yell, and even went over and shook him and said, Jesus, listen, don't you care about us? You've just done miracle after miracle after miracle. You've healed people, you've helped people, and this is what it comes to, us dying in a storm. Why don't you care about me like you cared about them? Jesus woke up from his nap, and he did something you never do in the middle of a storm on a boat. He stood up, and with a whisper he said, shh. Silence. Be still. And Peter was a little offended, and James and John and Andrew, they were a little offended. How dare you tell me to be still and be quiet? We're dying here. And then they realized that after Jesus had spoke, he wasn't talking to them, because the water had returned to glass. The wind had stopped and the waves were sleeping again. And he realized he was talking to nature. And they looked at each other and they said, who is this man? Who is this person that the wind and the waves obey him? And Jesus, still standing on the boat, still looking at Peter and Andrew, and said, with that quiet voice, said, why are you still so afraid? Do you not trust me yet? And with that, I'd love to welcome you into week 2 of our series on stories, looking at different stories in the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, about Jesus and his life and his ministry and just the things that he did while on earth. And you have a story, and Jesus had a story, and we're going to unpack these next 5 weeks, just the stories of Jesus. Now, today we're going to be in Mark chapter 4. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and flip open to Mark 4. If you see books like Malachi and Matthew, Luke, and John, you're really close. It's about a quarter of the way through. If you see books like Revelation or Genesis, Exodus, you're too far on the ends. Just work your way to the middle and then over and you'll find it. Or you can just do what us young people do, right? I'm not young anymore. What us phone people do. Hey, Siri, can you find Mark chapter 4 for me? And then we'll find it right for you. That's just technology. But Mark chapter 4 is our text this morning, and we're going to dive right in. We're going to read a few verses, and then we'll unpack it. We'll read a few more verses. We'll unpack that. We'll read a few more, and then our time will be up. But Mark chapter 4, beginning with verse 35, says this. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat, and they started out, leaving the crowd behind them, although other boats followed. Now, highlight that if you can, or circle that. We're going to come back to that. I think that's important. Other boats followed. It says, but soon a fierce storm came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Now, just real quick, I want us to understand kind of the magnitude of this moment. It says, out of nowhere, this storm came up. Other versions, translations of Mark 4:35 say a furious squall. Never used that word before in a sentence, probably never will, but it sounds fun. A furious squall. One translation says a violent windstorm. One translation says the waves were so big they were breaking over into and breaking the boat, because the boat was not rated to carry that weight. So you have to understand, as seasoned fishermen, they know the lake, they know the water, and it says out of nowhere this storm arose. This storm came at them and they couldn't process it, they couldn't handle it, they couldn't react. And then I got thinking about that thought, and I was wondering, what comes at us quickly? What comes at us so fast that it feels like sometimes we're just drinking from a fire hydrant? And the word is technology. Technology and culture are moving so fast at us right now, so quickly. Just think about the last handful of years. Just think about the last handful of years, the advancement of technology. Think about vacuums. All right, we'll start simple. Now you press a button and they take care of it yourself. You don't have to do anything. How many remember when you had the metal tube attached to the thin little head, and there was like a turtle shell behind you that you had to pull the turtle shell, and if you pull too hard, the tube would come out and the bag would explode and there'd be dirt everywhere. And then we got a little bit more technologically advanced and we had a jetpack. Remember the jetpack vac, and you look like the Jetsons from the future? Well, now we just press a button and it will clean itself. Think about cars, just the advancement in cars. Like King James doesn't have to do anything. He just presses a button and his car will drive for him. He is the greatest of all time. For all you Michael Jordan fans, we'll have that conversation another day. But LeBron James just doesn't have to do it. Cars drive themselves. I love this thing about technology, is I can order a pizza on my phone, and then I can see when the pizza's been ordered. I can see when it's been prepared. I can see when it goes in the oven. I can see when it comes out of the oven. I can see when they're on their way to deliver it. The only thing that's left in this pizza game is when they're going to chew it up for me and spit it in my mouth, because that's all that's left when it comes to the pizza game. Really, that's all that's left. Think about televisions. How many of you had a 720i television when they came out? Yeah, a few of you, right? That was the greatest thing ever. And then 1080p came out. We're like, whoa, that blows 720i out of the water. And then 3D came out. We're like, that's stupid. So we went to the curved TVs. And now we've got 4K. I don't even know what that means, but 4,000 anything is a lot. And so it's got to be good. It's 4K. It's fast, I guess. I don't know. And now think about the interwebs, right? We grew up on AOL, dial-up, and now there's 500 megabytes. I don't even know what a megabyte is, but anything that's biting 500 times a second is going to be really fast. It's a lot of biting. So this technology is coming at us. It's inundating us. Let's talk about cell phones for a minute. How many of you remember the bag phone? Anybody remember the bag phone? You're dating yourself. I love it. Okay, how about the brick phone? And then we went from the brick phone to the satellite phone. From the satellite phone, we went to the clamshell phone, to the candy bar phone, to the flip phone, and then we went to the PDA phone and the Razr, and then the Sidekick, and now we have this, the iPhone. And it's only been 10 years, that's it, since Apple released their first iPhone. But it's like every year they put out 2 or 3 phones, and it feels like every other week they're putting out a new iOS update, the operating system update. We're on like 17.3.9.124 times the circumference of the moon divided by the axis of the earth. Like, I don't even know what update we're on, but we're constantly being updated. We're constantly saying update, update, update to bring us the fastest, the newest, the bestest, the greatest information. And you know what's happening at the speed of life that's coming at us, the speed of technology? It's not slowing down. You know what's happening to our souls? They're becoming dry, because we can't keep up. And we're becoming barren. And there's a word that's happening to all of us. The word is anxiety. Now, before you get anxious about where the message is going to go this morning, let me try and bring you peace. And in no way am I trying to downplay or minimize, hear me, I'm not trying to sideline or ignore those of us that struggle with anxiety disorders. They're real. I have loved ones and friends that are on medication for it. But what I'm trying to do is help us understand that all of us can suffer from anxiety. No one's immune from it. Think about, as a parent, just think about the things that you can be anxious about for a moment. As a parent, whether your kids are still in the home or they're out, we could become, or we were, anxious about the choices they will make. I'm anxious about sometimes the friends that my kids have made and will make. How about our finances? It's really easy to become anxious about our finances. Will we have enough money at the end of the week to pay the bills? Will we have enough money at the end of the month? Are the debt collectors going to come asking for what we owe them? Can we afford it? We can become anxious about our health. Will my poor eating habits finally catch up with me? Maybe your dad had a heart attack at 50, and your anxiety is, will I have a heart attack at 50 like he did? Maybe your mom had breast cancer, and you're thinking, will I get cancer like she had? There are literally thousands of things we can become anxious about. So here's my working definition for today of anxiety. Now, if you don't like it, please don't tell me, but if you love it, feel free to use it, because I think this definition really works. Here's what I believe it is. It's a fill in the blank. Go ahead and write it in. My working definition for anxiety is this. Anxiety, anxiousness, is a current emotion. It's a current emotion based on the fear of a future event that causes inner turmoil, inner tension within us. Anxiety is this inner feeling that we have. It's current. Like, you can't dismiss anxiety. You can't dismiss it because it's a current emotion. Now, here's what I've heard people say this. Fear and anxiety go hand in hand. I believe that fear and anxiety are related. They're cousins. They're just not kissing cousins. Like, they're not from Arkansas. They're related. I love you guys. They're related, but they're distant, right? Fear, here's what I mean. Fill this in. Fear sees the threat. Anxiety perceives or imagines the threat. There is a difference. Fear, when you become fearful, you actually see the threat. When you're anxious, you're perceiving or you're imagining the threat. Let me try and help you understand the difference. Many of you know that my wife and I have a 13-year-old and 12-year-old, but we've got a younger half of the family that are 3 and 1.5. We waited a decade, press reset, did it again. I don't necessarily recommend that. I'm perpetually exhausted. But we have a 3-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. And at the bottom of the stairs in our house, we have a baby gate. Now, it's not one of those accordion gates. It's a baby gate that's spring-loaded. I don't know why, but it is. So you can leave it open and it will stay, but if you push it just enough, it'll swing shut and it makes a loud ka-chunk sound. That way we know if Hiccup's going upstairs to use Micah as a bowling ball to go down the stairs. Like, we can rush into action as parents to save the day. About 3 weeks ago, about 3 o'clock in the morning, the baby gate went ka-chunk. And I freaked out. I did what any man would do. Hey, honey, are you awake? There might be someone in the house. I'll protect the kids. Why don't you? I didn't do that. I grabbed my glasses, because I can't see without them, and I grabbed my baseball bat, my Louisville Slugger, and I started going through the house, and I had my cell phone flashlight. It's not intimidating, by the way. It sees like 4 feet in front of you, and then that's it. Like, I need a mag light or something, but I had my flashlight and my baseball bat, and I was going through the house because the baby gate ka-chunked at 3 in the morning. That's the technical term, by the way, ka-chunk. And at 3 in the morning, when you hear ka-chunk, you freak out. And I checked the whole house. I was checking in the cupboards. I was checking under the couch. The couch is like that. There's nobody underneath the couch. I was checking everywhere. I might have peed a little. I was so scared. And there was no one in the house. Everyone was sleeping. Everything was okay. And I went back to bed about 3:15 in the morning, and I laid there, and I saw 4:15 come around, and I saw 5:15 come around, I saw 6:15, and the alarm went off. Not because there was fear, but because there was what? Anxiety. There was no one in the house. but I imagined the threat. Do you see the difference between fear and anxiety? There is a difference. Did you know that 1 in 3 Americans suffer from anxiety? On some level, varying scales, 1 in 3. We spend $300 billion every year on anxiety medication, just anxiety medication. And again, I am not trying to minimize. What I'm trying to do is help us understand no one's immune from anxiety on some level. Teenage anxiety, according to recent reports, is at an all-time high and continuing to rise because they have this need for approval from people they don't know on the Faceplace and the Instas and the Snaps. I know a teenager that will post a picture, a selfie, of course, on her Facebook and Insta, and if she doesn't get enough likes, she'll take it down and repost it to get the affirmation she wants. Anxiety is at an all-time high within teenagers. We are 3 times more anxious in our current generation, this current culture right now, than we have been in any generation, any past generation, 3 times more anxious. Yet, hear me, we're the safest and most secure we've ever been. I already said it earlier, cars now drive themselves. Like, if you have a car that can drive itself, it will slow down or stop for you if it perceives the threat. We're the safest we've ever been. Think about our food. It's organic, pesticide-free, or free-range, grass-fed, non-GMO, all-natural, antibiotic and hormone-free, organic food. Like, we can be the healthiest we've ever been. Our economy is only at a 4.1% unemployment rate. It's a 17-year low, yet culture says Battle Creek is terrible. Friends, it's not as bad as we think it is. It's really not. We are so safe, we're so safe and secure that our doorbells have cameras. I can arm my house from my phone. I can close my garage. I can unlock my car. I can do everything. I'm so safe and secure. Heck, if I'm at the grocery store, I can look into my fridge from my app. Okay, I can't, but it's really cool that people can. And it doesn't mean you're safe and secure. I just think it's a really neat feature. But we're the safest we've ever been. We've got 5-point harnesses on our cars. And we've got airbags all over the place. My wife has 7 siblings in her family, plus mom and dad. They grew up driving a station wagon. Remember the old wood panel shaggin' wagon? There's 3 in the front, 3 in the middle, then there's 3 in the way back, but the people in the way back are facing this way at oncoming traffic, and they didn't wear seatbelts, and Rick would take a corner, and the kids would bounce around and roll around. We are the safest we've ever been. We're the safest we've ever been. So why is anxiety 3 times more prevalent now, and why is it on the rise in teenagers? Here's why. Because our brains are never off. We never turn our brains off. Now, I know what you're thinking, ladies. I see you elbowing. Hey, your brain's never on to be off. I get it. Like, men, listen, I'll apologize on behalf of men. God created us to do stupid things. Like, if you watch the YouTubes and fail clips, 99.99999 infinity, it's men doing dumb things. It's just how God wired us. Just embrace it. We do dumb things. If you don't believe me, check out this 45-second clip of men doing dumb things.
So, looking at buying a penny board.
I want to know what happened. Like, how did he lose that piece of machinery is what I want to, like, what happened? But we do dumb things. And I'm being a little facetious, and if you're offended by that, I don't apologize, because we do. But here's the deal. Our brains are never off. They're always on. Now, it won't work because it's not loud enough, but you know what happens every time you get an email? Boop-de-boop, you get a notification. And every time you get a text, boop-de-boop, a notification. And every time you get a voicemail that you bounce from a phone call, you get the boop boop, and you get an update of the score, boop boop, and you get a news alert from Fox or CNN, whatever floats your boat, boop boop, and you get a news report that the stock market's fluctuating, boop boop, boop boop. It's always going. We don't turn our brains off. When was the last time you sat with your phone off, your TV off, on the way to work with the radio or the podcast or the talk-to-text voice? When was the last time you just sat in silence and let God give you an iOS internal software update for your soul? We're constantly inundated. A barrage of information, a barrage of notes and reminders. And if I lose my phone or it goes down, I'm toast. It has my calendar, it has everything. I'm guilty of this. And my soul and your soul was becoming barren because we're always on. I think Jesus is onto something in Mark chapter 4. Because do you remember way back when the sun went down, the information stopped? Like, if you missed the 11 o'clock news, you had to wait till the morning to watch the news. And you would go out in your slippers and your boxers with your cup of coffee and pick up a newspaper. A newspaper for you younger folks is something that it was printed in black ink, and by the time you're done, like your hand was just covered in black ink. That's how you got your information. Right now, information comes to us when we want it to. We're inundated with it. Do you remember way back when you actually had to talk to somebody to find out how they were doing? To face-to-face conversation. Now we can follow along on their posts how they're doing. And because I can post what I want, I can make my life look really good. I can make my family look perfect. I can make everything look like a dream. And then what happens on the receiving end is you compare. You compare your mess of a life to their highlight reel because they're not going to show you garbage. And now all of a sudden you're anxious because you're not as good as they are. You're not as great as they are. You're not the best mom that they are. You're not taking them to the zoo like they are. And all of a sudden we're anxiety riddled because we're comparing ourselves. Do you remember what it was like when you had to wait an entire week to find out if MacGyver would escape from Murdoch with his duct tape and his Swiss Army knife, right? Like, you had to wait an entire week when that cliffhanger of an episode ended. Now you can binge watch 17 seasons of Friends in a row, and the people at Netflix are scared for your life, and they ask a question: are you still watching? Are you okay? Do you need us to send the paramedics? Did something happen? Like, the people at Netflix, like, they've watched 44 episodes of Friends in a row. I wonder if they're okay. Like, we can just binge watch. We don't even have to press play after 15 seconds. It does it for us. We're constantly bombarded with information and technology. And friends, our souls are drying up. They're drying up. When was the last time you just turned your brain off and pressed reset on your soul? See, Jesus says, I love Mark 38. Jesus teaches us this. This is fantastic. The storm is there. Peter, the disciples, they go to Jesus, and it says in verse 38, Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat. Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion, and the disciples woke him up shouting, "Teacher, don't you care? Don't you care that we're going to drown?" I realize what I'm about to tell you might sound a little crazy, but it's biblical. It's a fill in the blank. When anxiety and stress, when worry and fear and burdens begin to pile up, Jesus wants you to take a nap. Now, I need to clarify this, friends. Anything over an hour is a sleep. I'm talking a nap. Like, you can't sleep for 5 hours in the afternoon and go, that was a good nap. No, that's a second sleep. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. For those of you that sleep for 7 hours a day, that's an extra sleep. You don't want that. You just want a little nap. I think Jesus is teaching us that anxiety and stress, when they arise, take a break, take a nap, because it presses reset on your soul. I never understood this. My parents, every Sunday afternoon, my dad's a pastor. Every Sunday morning he preached, my mom helped lead worship. And every Sunday afternoon, for the most part, they napped. And I'll tell you, as a kid, I hated it. It's like, Dad, I just listened to you preach all morning. Now I'm going to listen to you snore all afternoon. This isn't fair. I got energy. I got stuff to do. Come on, come on, come on. And they would say, no, we need this. This is for us, this is time to just press reset. This is for us to press pause on life and reset our souls. Now, as a parent, I love a good nap. Less than an hour, people, 20 minutes, really, but a good nap. I think napping is biblical. I think Jesus understood the value of rest for his soul. And if Jesus took a nap in the middle of a stressful situation, why can't you? Why can't you just press reset? Get your mind off the burden, get your mind off the stress, get your mind off the worry, and press reset. I think actually what Jesus teaches us in this reset model is great. In Matthew 14:23, it says that Jesus sent crowds away and he went up by himself on the mountainside to pray. He got alone and pressed reset on his soul every chance that he got. Mark 6:46, after saying goodbye to the crowds, Jesus left for the mountain to what? To pray. Mark 5:16, Jesus himself would often slip away into the wilderness to pray, to press reset on his soul. When was the last time you got away by yourself, turned everything off and pressed reset and gave yourself an internal operating system update? Luke 9:18, it happened while he was praying alone. Hey, the disciples had a question. Where did they find him? Alone. Matthew 26, before he goes to the cross, he goes to the garden to pray. He understood the value of soul care. And if he does, we need to as well. Take a nap. Not right now, wait a little bit, but take a nap. Verse 39 of our text, the disciples have woken him up. If it's less than an hour, don't wake them up. They just get groggy. When Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Silence, be still." And you have to understand, the disciples thought, they had to have thought, he's talking to us. No one talks to the wind. No one talks to water. He's telling us to be silent and to be still. And then they realized all around them that suddenly the wind stopped and there was this calm. You know, when you press pause on life, when you press reset on your soul, you will have a calm come over you. And it's a calm that can only come from him. Then they asked him, so then he asked them, the disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Why do you still have no faith? You've seen what I can do." And the disciples were scared. They were terrified. They said, "Who is this man? He talks to nature and nature obeys him. He talks to the wind and the waves and it actually obeys him." And you know what? I think that I see in these three verses, that the disciples lost sight. The disciples lost focus of who was with them 5 feet away in the boat. They were coming from a miracle. They were coming from just this week-long Jesus doing Jesus things, healing. He had just raised a guy that was paralyzed. He raised him to full health, said, "Your sins are forgiven, pick up your mat and go home." The disciples watched that. They watched a man covered with leprosy, this skin disease. Jesus said, "Hey, you're clean, go ahead." And he was healed. They watched a man that had a deformed, kind of crippled hand from birth. Jesus said, "Hey, be healed," and he was healed. Hundreds of people have had demons cast out and they've been healed from their sicknesses. That's what the disciples have just watched. And now all of a sudden, he hasn't left them. They've just shifted their focus away from him. My question for you is simply, have you lost focus? Because he's still in the boat. He's still with you. He's only 5 feet away. Have you lost focus? Have you forgotten what he's done for you? Have you forgotten all the grace and the mercy and the kindness and the favor that he's shown you? Have you forgot? Because he hasn't. You see, Paul actually gives us what I would call a remedy. He gives us a remedy for how do we fight against, how do we combat against anxiousness. He writes in the book of Philippians, he says, "Listen, friends, don't be anxious about anything." Well, that's a lot easier said than done, my friend. So how? In every situation, whatever you're going through, in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving. Circle that, highlight that, underline that. Tap it in your notes in your Bible and highlight it, because that is the remedy. With thanksgiving, present your request to God. The peace of God, which will transcend your understanding, the peace of God will guard your hearts, guard your minds in Christ Jesus. I want you to know something. And in no way do I think that this message is good enough. I don't think that my teaching is good enough to be a cure-all for anxiety. But I believe Jesus is good enough to bring calm to your storms. Like I said earlier, I am in no way minimizing, downplaying, ignoring those of us that struggle with depression, those of us that struggle with anxiety disorders. They're real, and I get it, but I also believe that Jesus wants to bring calm to you. And Paul gives the remedy. Anxiousness and thankfulness cannot coexist together. One will always win. You'll be anxious and unthankful, or you'll be thankful and less anxious. Because here's what I believe happens. Anxiety in your life, anxiety in my life says, I'm not good enough. But thankful says, I don't have to be good enough. Jesus is good enough. Jesus is enough for me. Anxiety says, I don't have enough. Thankfulness says, my God will supply all of my needs. Not my wants, but my God will supply all of my needs according to his glorious riches. Anxiety says, I'm not strong enough. Thankfulness says, in my weakness, his strength will be made known. In my weakness, he will be my rock. He will be my foundation. He will be the cornerstone on which I build my life. Anxiety says, I'm a failure. Thankfulness says, yeah, I might have messed up, but by the goodness of God and the grace of God and the mercy of God, he picks me up and I keep going. Anxiety says, I'm a waste of space. I have no plan and God doesn't have a purpose. Thankfulness says, God does have a plan for me. It's plans to bless you and prosper you, not to hurt you and not to harm you. Do you see the difference? Anxiety and thankfulness cannot coexist in our lives. Oh, man, if we could get this, if we could land this in the soul, it doesn't mean you won't be anxious. It just means that you recognize it and go, I feel anxiety rising up. What can I be thankful for in this moment? Because they cannot coexist. Now, real quick, I'm running out of time. I need to flip back to verse 35 because I said I would come back to it, and I think this is really interesting. In verse 35, it says, as evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, let's cross to the other side of the lake. So they took Jesus in the boat and they started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. Do you know what that means? It means other people witnessed, other people watched. How will the disciples respond when Jesus is in the boat with them? Friends, that means that people will watch you. They'll see how do they respond when anxiety rises. Under pressure, do they snap, or under pressure, do they stand firm? Under pressure, do they explode, or under pressure, do they hold firm? People, friends, family, neighbors, coworkers will watch. How do you respond when anxiety raises its ugly head? The disciples missed the moment. They missed the mark. How do you respond? See, Peter was in the boat when he asked Jesus, don't you care about me? Don't you care about us? You know that Peter went on to write a book in the Bible called 1st and 2nd Peter, and he wrote in 1st Peter, he wrote, cast all your cares on Jesus. Cast all your anxieties and cast all your worries because he cares for you. You know why I know this, Peter said? Because I watched it happen in the boat a few years ago. See, 1 Peter 5:7, when he says cast your cares because he does care, Peter understands that Jesus actually does care. He's been on a receiving end of it. I want to close with this thought. How many of you have ever tried to carry a load or carry a weight that you're not equipped to carry? In essence, how many of you tried to carry something that you're not rated to carry? So my parents, when we were growing up, we had a red Dodge Grand Caravan. It only had one door. It's not like the fancy ones now with two doors. It only had one door. And my dad had this hitch put on, and he had this little wooden trailer that was made from like plywood. I feel like the axle was like PVC pipe or something. Like it really wasn't a strong trailer. But it worked, and it would haul mulch and different things back and forth. And my dad thought, because we were going to the cottage and needed to do some work at the cottage, that this trailer could carry the weight, could carry the load of a lot of 2x4s. So my mom said, "Are you sure it's gonna work?" And the famous words of any man, "We'll be fine, honey." And we got loaded up on this trailer, and we got going down the highway, and the weight of the wood was far exceeding what the trailer was rated to carry. It felt like the wheels were like bending out, and the PVC pipe was gonna break for our axle. And we got going 5 or 6 minutes down the road, and all of a sudden, the trailer began to wiggle. And if you know anything about carrying too much weight that you're not rated to, the trailer actually flipped, and 2x4s went everywhere, and my dad's plywood trailer was gone. Now, we weren't hurt, we were shaken up, but we weren't hurt. And I realized something looking back on that we're like the trailer. Sometimes we try and carry weight and burdens and stress and anxiety and fear, and we are not rated to carry it. Now, because I'm a visual learner, what I want to do is I want to give you a picture of this. I want you to see this played out. So I have 2 5-pound weights. Don't be impressed that I can hold these up for hours. They're just 5 pounds, but the weight is you. On one weight, I have a string that's not rated to carry weight. It's not designed to carry weight. It's just a piece of string. On the other weight, I have a piece of wire that's rated to carry hundreds of pounds of lights and gear that hangs above our head every week. We hope that it's rated right. Now, here's what happens. I want you to catch this. Here's what happens when we try to carry our own weight that we're not rated for. We snap. We are not rated. I'm not trying to offend you. You might think you're the strongest person in the world. You're not rated to carry it. You know who is? You can give the church answer here. It's Jesus. You see, when we take the same weight, it's still 5 pounds, when you take that same weight and you put it on something that's rated for it, it doesn't matter how many times you bounce around and fall in the waves and get tossed around. It doesn't matter because it's rated to carry the weight. And you know what else I can do? I can add more weight to it because it's rated to carry hundreds of pounds. So it doesn't matter what you think is too heavy for Jesus. You can keep throwing stuff at Jesus. You can keep calling out to Jesus. You know who's never gonna break? Jesus, because he's rated to carry your weight. He's rated to carry your fear. He's rated to carry your anxiety. That child that's wayward, he's rated to carry them. The bank account that's at zero, that when you're freaking out about your finances, he's rated to carry that anxiety for you. He will never break under pressure. And he wants to carry your burden. He wants to carry it for you. He doesn't want you to be this, snapping under pressure, because that's what happens. We snap, we break, we can't handle it. So here's how I want to end. I want you to picture this just for a moment. Picture the thing that's at the forefront of your mind, that anxiety. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's you hate your job. And every morning you wake up, the anxiety begins to rise because you hate your boss, you hate your coworker, you just hate going there. I want to give you an opportunity to give that to Jesus. Maybe you've got something that's just nagging at you. Every time you look in the mirror, all you see is your regrets and your failings. And it just is a burden. This is an opportunity for you to just to give it to him. See, in a moment we're gonna sing a song. We've already sung it this morning. We're just gonna reprise it, sing a chorus of it. Take it all, my life is in your hands. And you know what church people are really good at? Saying it and not doing it. You know how I know? Because I'm a church person. I'm really good at saying, yep, you can have it, and then taking my weight and putting it back on my shoulders like it's a badge of honor. See, what would happen if this morning, when I invite you in just a second to stand and to put your hands out, we actually put our hands out and say, God, my life is in your hands. I can't carry it anymore. It's yours. So I'm going to ask you to stand right now. Go ahead. And if there's something that you've been carrying, I'm gonna literally invite you to put your hands out. And we're gonna pray and we're gonna sing. And this is your act of surrender. This is your moment to say, my life is in your hands. I have tried for far too long to carry it. So let's pray together and then we're gonna sing together. God, for those of us that are standing here in this moment that have just said we've given it to you for so many years and we haven't, God, would you take it? Whether it's anxiety, whether it's fear, whether it's depression, whether it's worry and concern, whether it's this need for control, God, would you take it? If it's a work situation, take it. If it's a marriage situation, take it. If it's a child situation, take it. If it's a self situation, take it, God. My life, your hands. I'll just confess, God, I'm tired of snapping under pressure. It's the pressure of life, the concerns of life, the worries of life. It's a lot. I leave it in your hands, God. Take my life. So let's declare it to him this morning, church.